Welcome back to For the Record. I'm your host, Dr. Justin Allen Rose. For those of you who may be new to this show, I'm a political scientist by training. I spent years studying American politics, the media, and how politicians use messaging to shape the way we think. My dissertation was on political social media use, so breaking down how leaders talk, why they talk the way they do, and what effects it has on voters is my kind of specialty. Now this season, we're diving right back into the heart of politics, and there's no better place to start than the Oklahoma governor's race, because Governor Kevin Stitt is term limited, which means for the first time in 8 years, this is a wide open contest. And when you've got an open seat in a state as politically dynamic as Oklahoma, well, that means big personalities, big money, and big messaging battles. So today, I want to walk you through the field, highlight the candidates who matter the most, and give you my perspective as I see it on where this race is heading. And let's start by laying out the field. Right now, we've got several, and I mean several Republicans running, and one Democrat who officially declared. Some are, of course, major contenders, and others, well, are pretty much long shots. But it's important to put them all on the record. And first, Mike Mazzei. He's a former state senator who later served as Secretary of Budget under Governor Stitt. He's running as a fiscal conservative, emphasizing his experience balancing budgets and managing state finances. His campaign messaging leans heavily on education reform, cutting taxes, and protecting Oklahoma land from foreign ownership. He's positioning himself as the sort of numbers guy in this race, especially when it comes to that Oklahoma budget. Next, Lisa Mitchell-Haynes. She's a former city manager and a faith-driven candidate who emphasizes community, infrastructure, and education reform, which includes bringing prayer back into public schools. She doesn't have the same statewide profile as some of the others, but she's carving out space by appealing to values voters and presenting herself as an outsider. Then there's Jake Merrick, who's briefly served as a state senator in District 22. He's a former pastor, a professor, and a business owner, and a strong social conservative. He's leaning into faith-based messaging, gun rights, and traditional values, things that, of course, very much appeal to the typical Republican primary voter. Now, Merrick appeals to the grassroots right, though his limited name recognition could hold him back in this race. And then you have son of former Oklahoma Governor Frank Keaton recently announcing his run for that very same position. That son's name is Chip Keaton, a former Oklahoma highway patrolman and someone who has worked decades in the oil and gas industry. Chip did serve in Oklahoma government as the Secretary of Public Safety, and while his website at last check did not contain too much information on his policy positions, it did say he would follow the Trump playbook to keep Oklahoma safe while standing firm in what he called our conservative values. And finally, we have Kenneth Sturgill, a small business owner from Goldsby. He's brand new to politics and running a classic outsider campaign. His core issues are pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, and standing up for small business. While his campaign is unlikely to dominate headlines, forces like his do remind us how broad the Republican field can get in such an open race. So that's the supporting cast. But let's be clear here. The real story right now is about 3 candidates: Gentner Drummond, Charles McCall, and Cyndi Munson. These are the names that you need to know more than a year out from Election Day 2026. And let's start with Gentner Drummond. If you've been following Oklahoma politics, you know his name. He's the current Attorney General and one of the most visible political figures in the state. At KSWO, we run a story with his name in it almost daily. And Drummond has a fascinating profile. Military veteran, successful businessman, and now the state's top legal official. He's made headlines for taking on corruption and for his willingness to call out mismanagement in state government, even when it does come from his own party, the Republican Party. And that's where Drummond's strength really does lie. His messaging is very much rooted in law and order, anti-corruption, and accountability. He wants voters to see him as the tough but fair leader who's not afraid to stand up to entrenched interests. But that's also where the risk does come in. Drummond has ruffled feathers inside the Republican establishment. Some see him as a maverick, which can play well with voters, but can also make it harder to consolidate party support in a primary, let alone a fractured primary at that. If Drummond stays on message, emphasizing integrity, competence, and experience, he has a real shot at being the frontrunner when June 2026 pops up on everybody's calendar. But the question is, can he unite Republicans who may see him as too independent or perhaps even too liberal for comfort? If you are like me and like to keep up with all the political talk on social media, then you know that some of Governor Stitt's own people and even fellow candidate Charles McCall have attempted to paint Drummond as a sort of liberal never-Trumper. I mean, there is even a website that McCall posted the link to on the social media platform X, which is titled Never Trump Drummond. That website claims Drummond is a deep state pawn who donated to Joe Biden, did not oppose Trump's impeachment, and allegedly helped stop Oklahoma's ban on child gender transitions. These attacks will surely ramp up as we get closer to the Republican primary next year, and how Drummond responds or even deflects from these accusations could be key to who wins this race. Next up, Charles McCall, former Speaker of the Oklahoma House, one of the most powerful positions in the state. McCall is a known quantity in Republican circles. His campaign is built on continuity, conservative values, and sheer political strength. He's backed by years of legislative experience and deep connections across Oklahoma's Republican base. And let's not ignore the money. Groups supporting McCall have already made major ad buys, signaling he's already running a well-funded, professional campaign. Now, messaging-wise, McCall leans into America First style themes. His ads and speeches emphasize defending conservative values, growing the economy, and keeping Oklahoma on what he calls a strong path. He's presenting himself as the candidate who will protect Stitt's legacy, but avoid some of the controversies that came with it. The advantage McCall has is organization and funding, but the challenge? Differentiation. In a field where many Republicans are going to run on similar issues, tax cuts, being pro-life, pro-gun, and pro-business, McCall has to prove he's not just another establishment figure, but the candidate who can actually carry the party to victory in 2026. Now, let's talk about the one Democrat in the field so far, Lawton native Cyndi Munson. She's the minority leader in the Oklahoma House of Representatives and the first Asian American woman elected to the legislature, of course, in our state. Munson is a sharp, disciplined candidate. Her messaging focuses on education, working families, and government accountability. She's framing herself as the voice of middle-class Oklahomans who feel left behind by the political battles dominating the Capitol. But here's the reality. Democrats have an uphill battle in Oklahoma. This is a state that hasn't elected a Democrat governor since Brad Henry. But Munson is trying to shift that narrative by appealing not just to Democrats, but to moderates and independents who are tired of dysfunction. If she can make the race about bread and butter issues like education funding, healthcare access, and economic fairness, those populist issues, she could very well expand that Democratic base. But to be competitive statewide, she'll need to energize voters in Oklahoma City, Tulsa, and the suburbs, while also finding a way to cut into Republican margins in those rural areas, just like right here in Southwest Oklahoma. It's going to be a tough road, but her candidacy gives Democrats a credible voice in this race, and that's what matters. Before we move to analysis, let's talk about the wild card in this race, Ryan Walters, the now former State Superintendent of Public Instruction. Now, Walters hasn't officially declared just yet for governor, but there's a lot of speculation that he just might. And if he does, he could change the entire dynamic of the race. Walters is known for his culture war messaging. He's built his whole political brand around finding what he calls woke ideology in schools, pushing back against liberal federal influence and doubling down on conservative values in education. If he does enter the race, Walters would likely pull support from the populist wing of the Republican Party, the same voters who might otherwise split between Drummond and McCall. His presence could fracture the base even more and make it harder for any one Republican to secure a decisive early lead. But for Democrats now, Walters entering the race might actually help. His high-profile, polarizing style could motivate moderate and independent voters who might otherwise just sit out. So bottom line, if Walters jumps in, expect the race to get louder, sharper, and a whole lot more contentious. However, with him opting now to go into the private sector instead of continuing his work inside the government, I am now severely doubting that he will jump into this race. So what are voters actually thinking about, and how does it line up with candidate messaging? When I look at the landscape, I see 4 big issues. The first one being education, from funding to teacher shortages to parental rights. Then we have healthcare, especially rural healthcare access, which continues to be a crisis. Of course, we also have the economy, inflation, job growth, and small business stability. And then, of course, we have trust in government. After years of controversy and infighting at the Capitol, this might be one of the top issues heading into 2026. Drummond is the strongest on government accountability. McCall emphasizes economic stability and conservative values, while Munson is leaning into education and middle-class relief. Walters now, if he does run, will dominate the cultural conversation. But here's the gap. While candidates fight culture wars, many voters are just asking, can you fix our schools? Can you keep our hospitals open? Can you grow jobs in my town? Whoever best bridges that gap between rhetoric and reality will have the advantage in this race, at least when it comes to the general election. For the Republican primary, however, cultural war issues could be the main theme. So here's my view as I see it. Right now, Gentner Drummond has the edge as a frontrunner. His law and order, anti-corruption message resonates, and he does have statewide name recognition. Charles McCall, though, cannot be underestimated. His financial resources and establishment backing gives him staying power. And in primaries, that's what matters. Now, Cyndi Munson, on the other hand, faces an uphill climb, but she does represent a real effort to expand the conversation between, or should I say beyond, conservative talking points and focus on bread and butter issues. That's valuable, even if the odds are going to be against her. Then, of course, there's Ryan Walters. If he runs, he becomes a disruptor. Love him or hate him, his presence will change everything. So where does that leave us? Early days, lots of uncertainty. But if I had to call it today, I'd say Drummond and McCall are heading for a collision course in the Republican primary. And that outcome, the outcome of that one battle, will define what kind of race we see in November. Well, that's it for today's episode of For the Record. Thanks for tuning in, and thank you for sticking with me through this relaunch. I've missed these conversations, and I'm excited about what's ahead not only for this podcast, but for KSWO as a whole. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode. Share it with a friend who cares about Oklahoma politics. And follow me on social media for more analysis and updates between episodes. Until next time, I'm Dr. Justin Allen Rose. This has been For the Record.